Dear President Bush, to start with, countries A through Z are psychopaths regarding black people's whites of eyes and left out from the answers of what caused slavery that was entrenched before America's founders were born, but sickly distinctly A through Z. The breaching method employed that and the differences between A through Z. Rolls self-value with everyone, blaming other things others themselves for its use slash S of that. Forgiveness is because this breaching method forced collusion slash S at all locations slash S. Everywhere the human species body has a body standing. And then modern religious messengers were born to do damage control. But now there's already a complete syntactical possession slash hype. I mean, there's a complete syntactical hyperpossession. Like, for example, and there's needs for science to discern it that way, to label it that way, evaluate it that way, because there's needs to discern how a breaching method, it wasn't just the foundations of suits and ties, counters and exceptions. Still clearer than day, collusion slash S. The beginning of the Old Testament, people don't have to believe it. So I want the New Testament for these reasons, whatever. But regardless, it says at the beginning of the Old Testament, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part before it. So everyone defends that as styles of logic of reason out valuing sequence shifts, for example. And now it's no longer about sciences. It doesn't say, it says only defend right here. There are proofs that Christianity and Islam are multi-front counters to what is complete possession of the syntax of names A through Z, of bodies A through Z. Otherwise, that body is sensed at A through Z, including if that body is a majority of people, including if it is an entire country, and it is adapted to. Like how we didn't want the black people's whites of eyes. Again, replacing what nature communicates with this. Because it also shows us the fish have two eyes that look distinct, but non-distinct. And simultaneous, but also for that which is not us nor them, but is everything anyway, as a scientific value. To an extent we could discern. It comes also with its complete identity relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that. For example, to perceive that and to look and to use that to understand that that's science. Unabridged, Constitution is a policy. It is a foreign policy, but it has never been defended even as a homeland policy. And for the differences of states' rights or a federal as role and where the federal come from, locations, areas, states, whether it's called whatever, that's what it is in English. Because that's where we have this volume science where we are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences, plural, being generated by its own hypernative identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that, which shows us not only the difference of between, a president slash chief, but the hyper difference of it. And it's a value that way. At countries A through Z, even if there's no native population there. And all the narratives about what's native and all that. Like with the world wars. What preceded that. Right through it, roles with psychiatry. They put fake transcripts. A whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital have roles with police, Weatherfield police departments, retired police chiefs, and people tied to them. and their extended families with the same house/S with wire crimes of them, and with interbranch forging and switching names as ones involved with extended, so some of them with their extended family members at and next to the world, involved with the people at and next to the World Trade Center, and with the court next to it too, the Ninth Circuit Court. It was proven after the World Trade Center attack from inside the court, legally time-stamped papers have been, they changed the date and presented that to the court from inside the court. That was proven and led up to a 2006 district court part of the case. And I don't know, but names on both sides of the interstates, because that was in the court in Manhattan, New York, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the attack. Names on both sides of that case and the court were our fit to fake and change communications with myself and me with others, as recorded collusion/S increasingly with people from Central Connecticut State University and from other colleges and universities. That had, there's a hyper forensic trail of them having been planting evidences on all sides of people's houses relative to the families associated with a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living, involved with a whole bunch of judges and prosecutors on off the state corrections offices and on off the state judicial branch offices, involved with or used remotely originally and still at countries A through Z. All sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, their family members, their sources, the same thing with the positions at the courts and the news at the same time, and the differences of their collusion with that or the intelligence next to them too, or their past stories, which are used like all along Route 175 in conjunctions to it. The FBI has roles distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, while being and having been used remotely from their peak identities of sophistication, like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, note, therefore, groupings, and as an identity of law, as descriptions of it and of exceptions, exception nature, being and having been faked at a mass scale. There's a certain forgiveness is because it's not, people are forcing A, therefore B, Boolean logic to conceal where and how being and having been used remotely are all natures of crime scenes, and the difference of the guilt there or at the formal locations or the private ones associated, and increasingly at campuses and roles with databases identity of relativity / relativities to ourselves, like not just per nature's relativity to ourselves that way, but now a breaching method, its identity of relativity to ourselves singular as a singular breaching method that sustained roles with it that no one wanted, except for how they in their syntax, in their logic nature, everyone would say, well, it's not my fault. And they did their jobs. Like, including the people defending or what they, the differences of what they said regarding those crazy laws that hurt everyone sickly distinctly and benefited people sickly distinctly. And maintained while everything was being, this was a perfected since before modern religious messengers were founded. Already, no one had seen it coming from off all campuses' locations, how it stays from off them, and databases locations, on off them, hyper additional, apparent motivations, nature's needs, interests, including the real ones that come with other. This is a breaching method that is exploiting where and how we have replaced what nature communicates to us about difference. It's hyper difference. For example, is that which being the difference of having two eyes, for example, and we're having the same color eyes, being white and black pupils and whites of eyes, and we have exceptions in exception nature. But it's being projected to us by the identity of all things at once. We can only discern it to an extent, but it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself and the value of that three ways as itself increasing its value. Here, or it is forced from here, lethal hadith, per science, force, space, nature, transfer, where a special difference is also here, as Earth and as ourselves. As this identity that we have, the hyper evidential, not just fish and humanity with two eyes, with consciousness. And there are proofs that even the fish have consciousness. If you pay attention, even the bugs have an extent of an ability to communicate with ourselves. In other words, you would be surprised about how good you could get to, and swiftly you can communicate with a spider to walk onto a paper towel and then let you bring it out the door. And it appears to even help if you open the door and like try to communicate non-verbally, whatever, like just like the direction of it. Who knows? You know, but it works. If you do it, you literally run, but then you can get them to walk onto it, and then you go, okay, you know, and you keep them. I digress. In other words, so I was in the Ninth Circuit Court as an observer, and names of there, like for example, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. I'd never seen him at any of the campuses I went to. He's recorded involved with a pattern of predicate acts against me with a whole bunch of people, foreign and domestic, in Connecticut intercampuses through time, with people that also planted evidence on all sides of my house. Sequence shifts, fake ties to me. Some of them I don't even know other names. Increasingly, I found out it's the roles with multiple police departments and police forms at the same time with the same houses, personally and professionally. With them, with the Wethersfield police forging and switching names, falsifying police reports through time, all kinds of natures of organized crimes, foreign and domestic military at the same time. You know, there's remote possession over the suits and ties, counters and exceptions, and World Trade Center. Many people tied to a Joe DeMauro and a John DeMauro and a Paul DeMauro. Now, DeMauro's Market used to be right next to Harvard Hospital now. And because Harvard Hospital put fake conversations with me with the Leahy family, men and women with the triage part there, involved with judges and prosecutors from various courts and their family members, and other positions with the courts through time, collusion /S with use /S of names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and news, putting the same identity, theft, fraud, slanders, and sequence shifts, and with the courts and the intelligence tied to them. Increasingly, the written Superior Court, since I was a kid, has rules with intelligence at East Hartford locations, involved with them, with the names on all sides of my house, with people that had collusion /S made for them, putting predicate acts with facts into the databases at each campus I went to, and putting connections between uses /S that also brought up names next to the campuses involved with identity theft, fraud, slander, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and with the news to lock that in, and as ones with the Russians in Ukraine and their doctors. Harvard Hospital has a Ukrainian family. It has families near me involved with gun threats and overt criminal enterprises, threats to other families, and between them, They're making fights between people with the courts too that are forging and switching names. Increasingly, the Facebook pages of New Britain Superior Court and of Wethersfield Police, they have a Joshua Julian and a Joshua Stryker and a Joshua Schumack involved with also like different religions, people, but use/s of religious differences as the same names that have time collusions with some black KKK, Confederate flag themed at the same time with the overt criminal enterprises, foreign and domestic, and people with the Wethersfield town offices involved also planting evidence on all some sides of my house since I was a kid. And with my teacher, increasingly people tied to people with the name Riley involved with involved with calling threats on themselves. So there are people exploiting how there were already collusion/s with all kinds of legal treatments, where forgiveness is because these people came through sick campuses that were used criminally for an influence, tactically delusions raw, and self-valued roles because there's chaos. You guys had replaced what our founders communicated. James Madison did not have free speech when he was a founder with the founders behind him. And they went and got George Washington to agree to use their plan and to force the other founders at key locations. And there were more than 13 colonies in place. And they had slavery strictly distinctly, north and south, with the black. And with the black pupils replaced. And self-valued roles replacing what nature communicates. And self-valuing roles sentencing for the breaching method at the time and still. The breaching method, our founders communicated through declassified. There was a breaching method entrenched and no one could speak about it because there were internationally monitored conversations in those countries that were behind that, which had slavery strictly distinctly entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies before our founders were born. And this is sustained. So what's that going to cause? All kinds of positive and negatives and insidious natures to hide behind, whether it being synthetic, other things in nature's needs to blame other things, others, ourselves for the breaching method scientific value. Instead, as an answer, instead making other until that's true. And even when it's true, it would not stay if we would address that originally, this is the most principal thing of American history. We were directed to understand our founders as a plural, behind, but also as James Madison. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to use that plan and to counter-extort at key locations to make people to break the laws syntactically, which were also physically torture, extortion, slavery of everyone. Oh, well, why wouldn't they just, that's what they told us to get out. Well, why did they leave the slavery entrenched? People don't even know how to ask that question because how the slavery was entrenched. We have the federal and we have the states collusion/s with the differences there. With this breaching method showing all identities. To communicate other for our founders and to self-valued roles with that. You guys had others spoken for the short words proper regarding each subject. The scientists share an identity. And English was revealed to teach this. But England itself doesn't remember the history of English. There are proofs because English was revealed as a group part of a system that was being led by the hyper invisible but still discernible, and how it reveals exceptions in exception nature. As the republic for which we stand in its campus Marcia system, reliant upon the science of pantheism, being led by the one singular identity of space, all space/existence. To the extent we could discern, which again comes with its complete identity relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that, equally increasing as value, where value equals value as nature / nature as value in the opposite sequence / simultaneous nature as the identity of relativity that holds. For example, with this special difference, how Earth's a special Earth's concentrated identity relationship to the all space / existence, and like with the in other words, WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. And 3 times Hartford Hospital has a whole recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have a whole bunch of people tied to a Kevin Dillon. Involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with a whole bunch of different countries, and with people that put fake things on campuses, intercities. And they affected confessions to me, where there is communications, racketeering worse than war crimes. I've asked since before the World Trade Center attack, the executive branch and the judicial branch were all being used remotely, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Since before those members, older than me or younger than me, were alive, they were involved with this. Mark Violette will tell you, if he won't tell you yet. And these are increasingly people with UConn involved with the military, with a Mark Violette and a Justin Klavinskis. And I don't know where they went to. I don't know who their teachers were. I never had classes with them. And Joseph Dennis too. Increasingly, these are people involved with mayors too, and foreign and domestic medical families, and people tied to them with untimely deaths years apart. The same names rolled with U / S of that were the same names involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced years apart. Part of the thing is when people pretend they don't agree about things, and they don't, their premises treatments. In other words, nothing should be shocking, not just because of the nature of the, which trials are about, and slavery, black people's rights of eyes left out too on top of that. So it's not just slavery, it's whole nature's communications restricted to this fake integrity or sensed. And in other words, clearer than day. They're building upon predicate acts of facts at each campus we go to. And there are confessions that this preaching method showed. This preaching method views the difference between the branches of government, their integrity, how they read statutes, give themselves. How could they speak about crimes when they have roles with predicate acts with facts? I'm not even a lawyer. The lawyers are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs and exploits that. Even Trantolo has roles with WFSB's ongoing confessions and demonstration of their roles with them. Increasingly with police departments, family members, retired police chiefs and detectives, intercities, with the same house / S involved with untimely deaths years apart, and a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital, including the lawyers there, and their roles with UConn too, with that, and with judges, prosecutors putting fake things in databases. Yeah, they know I caught them. In other words, I warned them. In other words, because it's not trying to trick them. We need to get them on paper now because they won't communicate with me. They pretended through the mail they had conversations with me. They forged doctors' names. They forged people's names. All kinds of criminally foreign influence uses throughout the country of people tied to Nexus databases. And it's tied to the terrorists effectively. The effective uses of the World Trade Center attack and a remote use / this is also how the beginning of the Quran too, just like the beginning of the Old Testament. It also has a part that says it's the most important, only thing that matters. But rather than do that, people want to go to the part where there's killing. The part where there's self-value rules with the nature of debate used to sense for the breaching method, anything blamed, anything other things, others or selves blamed, rather than the breaching method. Otherwise, it senses, but through our own. It employed the most principal things of principle itself. In other words, forsaken behind and as the logic and the nature of that which we have heard claim principle. In other words, so we have this replaced this most principal thing, the plural founders behind James Madison as him and his plan. Then they went and got George Washington to agree to that, use that plan. And no one even allows honesty about the extortion of George Washington, and about how what even then as the president, again, hyper additionally now as a founder, then as a president too. But even when he was a president, James Madison didn't have free speech of the quality, aspect, and nature necessary to defend the Constitution unabridged. And why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. And how that has been forsaken, even with these most sacred things by people. Which all must see the whites of eyes. How could they, at countries A through Z, have entertained, syntax regarding economies and reason regarding and claim that practical with the breaching method left out? Because nature itself recorded it right through time. When we hear, just because something's published, it's given a value it doesn't have. And just because our founders said things, they declassified. It was a breaching method that was measuring everyone's words, collusions against everyone else to an extent. Otherwise, they were our sense. They never went away. There are many prey vaccines. Just things, but long. So all we have to do is get the Connecticut interbranch onto paper, and you will see. In other words, otherwise, you're just going to keep investing locations, areas, and states used remotely, never unabridged, breached. That's why I had to effectively pulled off these things right through world wars too. Psychiatry was entrenched with predicate acts methods and tactical delusions we're going to address with the role just concentrated though. With the private side and the military side and the inter-services side, to all positives and negatives and all differences, like which trial is about. Even if it was made up, you don't leave out the slavery laws against everyone, the torture, extortion, slavery against our founders distinctly. In other words, let alone we don't leave out how sickly non-distinctly. We don't leave out the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. That's what nature shows us. Could leave it out, we could ignore nature. It will demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts and natures. Like regarding, we polluted the whole sea, the whole entire ocean. And the homes were built before America's founders were even born. There are still homes built. And there were laws that were entrenched that made it, if anyone, they could have built better and safer then. But if anyone was found out to have been, I learned at Central Connecticut State University in notes that if anyone was found to have been speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations, they went after that people. They hurt them and everyone around them, killed them. It's not just by accident. There's that knave integrity, pretending it's integrity with black people's whites of eyes. In other words, please, former or standing presidents / chiefs who disbelieves each class I went to, I'm gonna show you there's connections with those people that went with the World Trade Center attack. And nothing personal, but they can't take an instance with proper appreciation of it. And they're framing people for using drugs. They never use drugs. And making mistakes on purpose. And all kinds of entertain things that you can't entertain. At Harvard Hospital, hospitals throughout the country. Harvard Hospital has an Institute of Living on their campus, founded in 1822, with slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, and other communicated for it. Our founders regarding how George Washington had to come to Wethersfield, Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, before the last battle of the Revolutionary War to counter-extort. But having to only means to have, they had to leave slavery entrenched. They had to force people to have no choice to defend themselves from the internationally entrenched. Also for the hyper internationally entrenched. And more since semi-ancient times. The more and more sophisticated get, the more and more they cannot defend. They can't afford to be, let alone to protract. Short words with convictions proper by the sciences. Let alone with convictions, let alone with convictions with guilt. In other words, still has collusion /S with the state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial branch offices. Increasingly also with names recorded through time involved with predicate acts on my street and with the syntax on all sides of my house, all sides of their houses. This is a hyper foreign involved. These are names with all the names in the countries in the news. So Harvard Hospital has roles with foreign and domestic military, intercities and intra-cities with the family members of courts and of police forms and of mayors at West Hartford locations, at New Britain locations, at Newington locations, at Hartford locations, Rocky Hill locations, Cromwell locations, Glastonbury. These names, there's a Scalora family that has roles. I never had a class with them in my life, never saw them. And the inside of a school, they tried to make one fake exception in Glastonbury by yelling out like it was a fake exception of knowing me, with people on the state judicial branch offices in conjunctions to it, who have been planting evidences intercities with as the ones involved with Claudia Scalora with the World Trade Center attack, and with timed collusion /S with the World Trade Center attackers, with people named DeMoro long term leading up to the World Trade Center with her, and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and their roles with a whole bunch of people tied to her. I don't know if it's really her boyfriends or they just say that. So when people say things, because they have the intelligence community use the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. Self-value, even though they're supposed to get in trouble for that. But just on a mass scale with their difference too. Like the differences of their guilt or the other agencies involved. And from the founding locations in Wethersfield, Connecticut, these are also people right next to the founding locations, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slingers, timed identity theft, fraud, slingers at locations, planting evidence tied to their roles with the campuses. I never had a class with Daryl Chandler. I don't know his sister's name. His family's name is involved with intelligence communities and people at Central Connecticut State University in Brighton, Connecticut, involved all along the Southstein Highway and all along roads and routes, intercities with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, as well as with the ones on my street from other areas I never saw on my street in my life. But like a Robert Rodriguez also brought up the name Scalora and his confessions. And his roles also, there's a bunch of people tied to WFSB, has roles with foreign and domestic medical families that have been putting fake transcripts in databases. And they have been doing sick things with foreign and domestic military and police forms together on and off the campuses too, how they're training people. They're not, or what they're doing with the kids, increasingly acting both sides of, timing where people are going to go. And with their involved with communications, racketeering, worse than war crimes. Central Connecticut State University has roles with a whole bunch of police forms in East Hartford, their family members through time. Central Connecticut State University and the Britons, Connecticut, they have roles with Detective Samuda, involved with some female judges, black, white female judges, with some KKK Confederate flag theme, involved with sequence shifts and identity theft fraud, predicate acts on my street, and their roles with the intelligence families that have wire crime roles and falsified police reports, including in the form of fake conversations with me. I never went to make a police report. They wanted me to go see the police and speak with them when I was a kid. After I had been, and someone had Chris Walters drive to school with me. He wasn't even in my school, and with my neighbor. And I didn't even have communication with him in the car. I don't know what they went there for. And the kid gave me his affidavit because they made him make up all these different things. And increasingly, that kid and people tied to him and his families have been making things up with the people I caught with the sexual and medical offenders of kids and judges and prosecutors and different positions of the courts involved. Before the World Trade Center attack, they effected requests for help from me. These are not legitimate roles with their positions with the departments, intercities and intra-cities. Increasingly with the ones with Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, with this police chief Cintron, and 1 year before him, and their family members in intimate ties with the same houses involved with wire crimes with them. Bob Chase increasingly is involved with a whole bunch of people with whiting forensics, with digital and wire crimes, with news, and with child sex offenders and medical offenders of kids. Whiting Forensics has roles with their patients and criminals, and intelligence in their roles. Increasingly, people tied to a former Mayor Gold have roles of all kinds of natures of organized crime and predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and his kids per other people. I never had a conversation with him in my life. His daughter tried to fake conversations with me and sequence shifting with intelligence families, the ones that are increasingly involved with different natures of wire crimes with the police, sending police to people's houses. I caught them one time. I forced them for a few days to demanding people to call police without telling them why. And then when they did call the police and I got my response, I had no communications with them because I saw who was there. Like one's named Leahy, and I recognized them. Because in other words, and they had been confessed to me by people that were involved with planting evidences in databases, like named C.M. Faglione. And there are proofs, and like there's a Mark C.M. Faglione and a Rick C.M. Faglione. And they have roles of people with the databases and intelligence with a whole bunch of different countries and the differences of their guilt or the other countries that is used to remotely too, just like Saudi's roles and America's roles. with the World Trade Center attack. Also relative to the tactical delusions wrought readings of the religious books and roles with a whole bunch of people involved with the wire with predicate acts on my street also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed spots next to a Dr. Shub of modern languages involved with intercities with spots on along Two Rod Highway with people involved with judges and prosecutors and probate courts with foreign and domestic with their family members involved with all kinds of with the same house slash S with wire crimes with them, all kinds of delusions, criminally foreign influence, use slash S of them, and their roles with these people they named Scalora. Increasingly, as people involved that said that they're cousins that are also recorded involved with home break-ins through time, where the police have roles with that, and other natures of organized predicate acts with that. You know, in other words, and with that, where they on a mass scale, I recorded how they keep the police departments criminally foreign influence by having them report fake things about when they go, why and how they go to people's houses. And then when they have to go for real, there are a whole bunch of ways and reasons they can't afford to have discerned accurately what happens, like when people raise their voices. So they start fishing for any truth to use for a lie. And pretend that people confirm it by using dishonest tricks too. So there's another reasons why we need more to have to get them onto paper. So before the World Trade Center attack, people have been attaching me to identity theft, fraud, slanders, and lying about their motivations for it. And including, these are people increasingly with the medical community, with the intelligence ones with badges, and gabbles with the intelligence community, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought with their family members, showing they need to put fake things in databases, and their delusions, which are relative. I shouldn't have to beg to get them on paper. You can't go to the Wethersfield police. They already faked the conversation with me as a kid and then as an adult too. And with these Mendez brothers, there are two Mendez police brothers. They're reportedly brothers. I never had classes with them. They're increasingly involved with the Saudi attackers and with people with the name Tomorrow and people with the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices. And involved with conversations with the Casper family and people with a Thomas Potter and a Mr. Potter. I don't know his name. No, I had good feelings for Mr. Potter. A Chet Casper. He has roles with someone named Pete. I don't even know his last name. They have roles along the Burlington Turnpike and along Route 3 with intelligence families. Involved with intelligence families near me, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them, sequence shifts with them. And they act so other people can, because they have roles with criminally foreign influence uses of investigators. And their educators are involved. He might be, there was one of the ones from New Britain, Central Connecticut State University, involved with the military with the name Burstein. A David Burstein, a Stephen Burstein, and Al Bernstein. I don't know if they have a sister. And their neighbors, further involved with the principal upskirt nature and other principal, a daughter of another principal, Rixie and Faglione, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the prosecutors and judges, and people involved with the medical offenders of kids with the Slahy family, involved with identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts with them, and people from other classes putting fake things in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to other kids, with the ones that are putting fake things in databases with the police, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Now they have people in positions with the campuses that have already been jumping up in the background, repeating fake things with the agencies. They're not legitimate with the agencies. No, increasingly whiting forensics needs to get on paper too with the rest of the people involved with them with this Phil Cololo and the confessions of them. They brought up the name Christina. They didn't put the last name, and they won't get on paper. Get them on paper. I want a response for what I caught them doing with the principal upskirt nature. Worst thing he's put in jail for. I caught him and them with it. And with their roles with the people near Knott Street. In other words, tell them too, not to pretend to know me. Yeah. Please, get them on paper, one name and sequence. Please, how many years do I have to wait for someone to get on paper, one name and sequence? And I'm going to show you the delusions too. You have some sick delusions with your logic, reasons, experts. We owe this to our black pupils, each, let alone those labeled black, leaving this out. Black pupils, yeah.